So good afternoon, Craig Kiger with Minnesota DNR Outreach, and today is episode 135, Knives and Keeping Them Sharp. It's probably the second most important piece of equipment that an outdoors person can take into the field. I mean, you can catch the fish, you can get your deer, but without a knife, that's pretty much where you're at. You got to get that knife into work. So we have brought in our knife expert, um, all the way from should we say North Iowa or Central Iowa?
Central Iowa.
Central Iowa. So Derek Clark is our speaker today. So Derek, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself and then move right into the presentation.
All right, thanks, Rick. So my name is Derek Clark. I'm a BHA treasurer for the state of Iowa chapter. Also an outdoorsman. I grew up going to gun shows with my dad, and as a kid, I couldn't collect guns, so I started collecting knives, and it's just kind of grown as I've gotten older. Now I'm an engineer, so I got enough salary to buy a lot of knives, and kind of got really into the different blade steels and things like that. So we'll touch a little bit on that today. So first off, presentation work. There we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about the purpose of different knives, bladeology, so the design of blades, the tang, which is another part of the knife. Talk about different folding knives, the materials, so the blade materials, handle materials, the different types of materials used for sheaths, a little bit on care, cleaning and sharpening, and then making the choice. So first off, you need to think about what is the purpose that you're going to use your knife for. Are you going to be using it for fishing knife, fillet knife? Is it for, general purpose, everyday carry, boning, skinning? Are you going to be doing any sort of bushcrafting with it? You got to really think about what you plan to use that knife for, or what you'd like out of that knife. So first off is the design. So there's different aspects of the design. So you have the blade, which is the part that gets the work done. The tang, which is the part that's inside the handle that you get a hold of. And then there's different folding knives that have the blade and then their handles as well. So right here's a quick, diagram of what a blade should be, or has all the parts to it. So starting at the tip, there's different styles of tips. Typically for hunting, bushcrafting, everyday carry, you're going to see mainly drop point, which this shows, or clip point blades, which are fairly common in your buck 110, 112, those type knives. The belly of the blade, so that is kind of what you do your skinning, cutting with. The bevel is your cutting edge up into the actual face or cheek of the blade. Back here at the back of the sharpening edge, you might have a little space there. So that area is called the choil. So that just helps with the cleaner sharpening edge. You have the bolster right here, or the hand guard. And then underneath the scales or the handle, you have the tang. There's different types of tangs, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. And then the pommel. The pommel is the bottom end. So the pommel can be have a lanyard hole in it. It can be a blunt object. It's similar to like the old military fighting knives that had blunt ends on them that were used for more or less a hammer in their time. Right here is just an example of one of my first hunting knives that I had, and as I go through the presentation, I'll show some different knives and different styles and talk a little bit about them. So this is a standard old-timer charade hunting knife. It's got a drop point with a gut hook on it. It is a full tang knife, so full tang means that it goes all the way to the end underneath the scales of the handle. It does not have a sharpening choil, so there's a little flat spot at the back side of the blade. Some people prefer having a choil there, some people don't. This knife has rubberized grips to help with wet conditions. It's got a nylon sheath because it's a cheaper, mass-producible way to make sheath. So right here is just a quick chart on different types of grinds, different types of points. So like I said, you've got your drop point, which is your standard one that a lot of people see. Same with clip point. There's several others out there. There's different types of grinds and edges that for different purposes. Typically, what you're going to see in a hunting knife is going to be your flat grind here, or a hollow grind. Those lend the most strength and give you kind of that sharp edge, but also some meat behind the cutting edge for strength. So digging into the tang of the blade a little bit here. So the top picture you see is a full tang. So what that refers to is the full size of the handle within it. That gives you the most strength. It is going to be a little bit heavier, but that it doesn't leave any weak spots where the blade can break off should somebody start prying or using it to break any sort of bones like a sternum or a pelvis in a deer. Skeletonized tangs, so those have become more popular in recent years. Skeletonized tangs sometimes are exposed, sometimes they're not. It's usually for weight reduction is the reasoning behind that. A lot of knives that do have skeletonized tangs anymore will have a wrap, usually paracord or something around it, just to decrease hot spots and add a little bit of comfort when you're using it, as well as that survival aspect of having the paracord there. Partial tang knives, that's not one that I see a whole lot of, but partial tang knives, they're a little bit lighter. That tang is hidden within either stag, bone, wood, whatever the handle might be made out of. Sometimes they're just epoxied in there. Sometimes there's a rivet, but those tend to be a little less sturdy than either of your full or skeletonized tangs. And then you've got your hidden tang knives, so your narrow and your stick tang. Again, those are very similar to your partial tang, but they're hidden within the handle, typically having some sort of rivet or epoxy that holds them in. They look a lot cleaner, but they lack the strength that your full tang is going to have. A lot of times you'll see those, like I said, with stag handles, sometimes wood. A lot of kitchen knives are that way. So what we have here, so this is a custom knife that I had built a few years ago. It is a full tang knife. It goes all the way back here. It doesn't have the choil that I referred to a few minutes ago. It is a drop point. This is good for skinning because it's got that nice round belly to it. It doesn't have a sharp point where you could actually poke into anything. It has a leather sheath with it to give it kind of that classic look. Over here, this is an example of a skeletonized knife. So this is a knife from Gerber. I had wrapped it with paracord just because, like I said, without any sort of scales on it or anything wrapped around it, it does tend to give you some hot spots in your hand, give a little discomfort if you're not wearing gloves under heavy use. On the back side of the blade here, you're also going to see some what's called jimping. This gives you a little extra grip if you want to put your finger up there, if you're doing some fine work when you're starting to field dress or things like that. This knife here came with a plastic sheath. Again, it's a easy, quick, mass-producible sheath that's pretty durable. Here's a couple examples of hidden tangs. So these are all the handcrafted knives that were from when my dad used to do buck skinning, but they have hidden tangs inside the deer antler here. Have that great classic look to them, give you some grip with the shape of the antler, but they're not going to be as strong as that full tang knife is. And then this is a kitchen knife that I have, and it is a partial tang. It goes just past where you see this little rivet that holds it together. They're nice, clean look. They're going to have usually one-piece handles, but it doesn't have the strength that full tang is going to have. Now let's talk a little bit about folding knives. So folding knives aren't just for hunting. A lot of people, I should say, uses them in everyday use. I carry a pocket knife or two every day. Just depends on what I'm looking to do with it. So some different types of folding knives are your slip joints. What that's referring to is it doesn't have a lock that has to be taken off of it to get it to close again. So a lot of your gentleman's knives, what you might carry in your pocket to church on Sunday would be considered a slip joint, Swiss Army knives, things like that. Manual opening knives. So pretty much for outdoorsmen, I'd say manual opening knives are the best thing that you can have. Assisted and automatic knives just tend to have a little bit more mechanical aspect to them, that if you're out there getting dirt, any sort of debris in there, they can malfunction. They do a great job as far as one hand opening and opening quickly. different locking mechanisms that are pretty common. So lock back, everybody is pretty familiar with the lock back knife. That's, everybody's had their buck 110, 112 since they were little kids. I know that was probably one of my first knives. It's great for a beginner because that's going to positively lock that blade open and you don't have to worry about it closing if you're doing something wrong with your knife like a slip joint would. Axis lock or bar locks. So if you see this knife right here, this has got what's called an axis lock on it. It was a lock that Benchmade has used for several years. Recently, their patent expired on it, so you see it on a lot more knives. I know Gerber's come out with their line. It's a very, very nice one-hand closing knife, easy to remove that lock. There's a little spring that will kick it up into the backside of the blade when you get the knife open. You can also pull that back and you're able to flick the blade open one-handed. So very similar to an assisted or an automatic knife as far as speed and ease, but doesn't have the rules and regulations that go with that. Liner locks, those are another one that's very commonly seen around. It's instead of being on the outside of the knife, it is on the inside. So as the blade comes open, a piece of spring steel would kick across the backside of that blade and lock it into place. Frame locks, same concept, except for instead of being a liner within the knife, it is the backside frame, usually on the pocket clip side, that'll do that. And then button locks, a button lock knife, it might appear to be an automatic knife, but realistically what it is just a spring-loaded pin that will kick across into a detent on the backside of the blade when you open it up. So right here, this is a Benchmade tagged out, but it has got their axis lock on it. Its opening mechanism, like I said, it's a manual knife with a thumb hole. There's different shapes and sizes of thumb hole. They can be round, they can be oval like this. It just allows easier one-handed opening with gloves on when you're in the outdoors. This knife here is an old traditional slip joint knife with a thumb nick to open it, but it's got a brass liner in it that kicks across and will keep the blade open when it's in open position. Here's an example of a frame lock. So typically your frame locks are going to be some sort of steel because it needs to have that toughness and be able to open and close many times without breaking off. But this one actually is titanium. This little dot you'll see here is called a spring stop, or it keeps the frame lock from overextending the wrong direction and not actually being able to lock to the knife when you're pushing the blade open. This one has a fuller groove for opening, so instead of a thumb nick or a thumb stud or a thumb hole, it's got this long recess in the blade that you can either hit it with your thumb, your forefinger, whatever it needs to be to open it up. This knife here, it's got a thumb lock or a back lock on it, and this one's been modified, so this is your standard buck 110, but it's got a thumb stud on it for opening, so you can either use that if you got gloves on, or you don't want to two-hand open it, or it's got the thumb nick as well. Another type of opening mechanism that's, instead of having the thumb stud, you've also got flipper tabs. So a lot of knives nowadays have some sort of bearing inside of the pivot on it, which helps it open with ease. This one here has the thumb or the flipper tab on the back side of it, so you can use your index finger and push that while you flick your wrist, and it'll kick open pretty easily. It's great for one-hand opening when your other hand's tied up doing something. This knife here has got a liner lock, so this side of it's just a little bit more shallow than the back, so that you can push that open push that with your thumb to be able to close the blade. Another type of knife that I didn't talk a whole lot about, I guess, was the replaceable blade knife. So this one here is a Havlon that I carry on my deer pack, but it's got a thumb disc, very similar to the thumb stud. Just another type of opening, one-handed opening that you can use. Nice thing about these knives is you can get different types of blades, whether it be a straight scalpel blade, a gut hook. You can get small saws too. So it gives you that versatility of multiple blades without having to carry them in your pack. Now let's get into the geeky side of things. So like I said, being an engineer, you kind of dive too deep into stuff that a lot of people don't think about. But the part of your blade that does the most work is the blade itself, and knowing what it's made out of and what that steel is good for is very important. So diving back into it a little bit, Damascus is what a lot of people think of as a strong steel. Um, it came out, 500 AD. That's kind of a unknown history to it. I guess it's either Middle East or Asia was the origin of it. But what it is it's just hammer welding steel and folding it over and over again until they say a good Damascus is 300 to 500 layers thick. Most of the Damascus you see today is usually lesser quality than what you would have seen in the past, because to get the nice patterns like you see here, they use some softer metals, and then the final process of the Damascus forming is you acid etch it. So what that acid does, it actually eats away some of the softer material to give the different variations in the ridges and stuff you see there. Another type of steel that's been around for a long time is, your normal carbon steel. So 1095 is your most common carbon steel that is used in blades. The different knives that the military has used have been made out of 1095 for many years. The problem with your carbon steels is they don't have that corrosion resistance and stainless characteristic that you might want. So they're going to take a little bit more care, or if they have to be coated. This knife you see over here, this is a knife made by Seven Forge, which is a knife maker here in the Des Moines metro area. He was actually one of the winners on Forged and Fire this last year, but it's made out of 1095. They're very durable, strong blades, but like I said, without having any chromium in that metal, there's no stainless tendencies. Another option you see a lot of these days are tool steels. Tool steels have been used in manufacturing for many years, whether it be, chisels, hammers, things like that, dies. So three very common ones you see are A2, D2, and M2. A2 is exceptionally tough. It's got 1% or roughly 1% carbon in its makeup and 5% chromium. So like I said, the chromium is what helps with that stainless characteristic. But to be considered a stainless, it's got to be about 13% chromium. D2 is another one that's very popular. There's a lot of D2s out there on the market. The one thing you got to be aware of is not all D2s and not all steels, I guess, are the same. You might have a D2 from one company and a D2 from another, and they could be completely different contents of chromium and stuff in them. So D2 is a semi-stainless steel. You're going to find anywhere from 11 to 15% chromium in it, and it holds an excellent edge. It's somewhat corrosion resistant. M2, M4, those are a couple you'll see in the knife market. It's amazing at edge retention. It's very strong for the edge, but it's kind of brittle because of the carbon content, and the molybdenum or moly is what helps with the edge retention in it. So it's one of those that starts to introduce that into the makeup of the steel. Stainless is what most people are used to and what most people would want in a hunting knife, because you're going to be out there where it could be wet, could be dirty. You might not be able to clean your knife right away. So just having that ability to not worry about it rusting right away. Now, stainless does not mean that it's corrosion resistant. It means that it has some resistance to corrosion, but stainless steels, even the best ones, will still rust. There are steels out there that are completely rust resistant, but they're not great for a lot of other things. Stainless steel came out in 1912 or 1913, sorry. It was actually found when they were trying to figure out a way to make a better gun barrel. So in 1929, they figured out how to harden it, and that's when you started seeing it more and more in surgical and cutlery applications. The steels that you see a lot of today, AUS, so if it's got the AUS designation, usually AUS 8, those are blade steels that come from Japan. So S30, 90, 110, the SV series of steels, those are ones that are high in vanadium, so that increases the strength of the blade or the hardness of the blade. Vanadium, so S30, you'll see S30, 35. The 30 means 3%, 66, 90, and so on. Benchmade uses it a lot. Spyderco, there's all kinds of different companies that use it in their knives. It's become kind of the standard the S30V has. You'll see CPM in front of some of them too. So CPM is an American-made steel company. It's Crucible that came out around 1900. CPM stands for Crucible Particle Metallurgy. So those metals are actually made out of powder. And if you look at the edge of something that's made out of CPM under a microscope, it almost looks like it's got small serrations in it. So it actually aids in the cutting ability of it, and they're a little bit stronger. Because of that powdered aspect of it, everything's a little tighter in the grain. 154 CM is another one of their steels that you'll see a lot. So I know Benchmade, that orange handled Benchmade I showed, that was a 154 CM blade. So it's in essence a fancy 440 stainless steel. It's got a little bit more edge retention, a little bit more stainless capabilities or properties to it, but it's very similar to your 440 that you use on most daily knives. I just wanted to throw this up here quick. This is a chart of different steels. So 420 stainless versus CPM S30V. The things that you usually want to see in your knives are your edge retention, which is the ability to maintain a sharp edge; toughness, so the ability to not chip or break that blade; corrosion resistance, ability to fight rust, patina, and staining; and then ease of sharpening. So ease of sharpening, if you got high edge retention, you're typically not going to have that ease of sharpening. So they kind of fight each other a little bit. But those are the things that most blade steels are judged by. This chart here just kind of shows those two knives or those two steels against each other. This can be found on bladehq.com. The link should be in the chat. I sent that out earlier. If anybody wants to take a look at different steels, comparing them to each other, that's a good place to look. Talking a little bit about handle materials now. So common handle materials: wood, micarta, G10, FRN, rubber, stag, different types of steels. So everybody's familiar with wood. Wood has always been around as a good thing to use for them, easy to come by, easy to shape, easy to work with. A lot of your blades you see today that have wood handles, that wood has actually been stabilized. So by doing so, it is embedded with polymer that's put in under pressure. So that helps it resist the elements, whether it be cold, moisture. It just helps that wood stand up and not actually move and crack and change from the elements. Micarta. So micarta is actually a layered fibers or linen, paper, fiberglass, carbon fiber with different types of polymers and resins in there. It was actually come up with by George Westinghouse for an insulator for electrical appliances. But that's it's a good material that they've started using in a lot of knives for handles. It's got a soft feel to it because of the linens and the cottons and things that are in there, but then the resins hold it together. So it's going to change a little bit over time with wear. The oils in your hands will change the coloring of it, but it's a good option out there. G10. So G10 is more or less a thermoplastic. It's layered, so when you look at it, it looks kind of like wood or like Damascus, but it's just the different layers of the plastic on top of each other. So the G stands for glass epoxy, and 10 is the type of epoxy that's used to hold it together. FRN, or fiber reinforced nylon. So it is a plastic that has got fiber strands in it to help with its durability. That way it doesn't bend or break as easy. If you do happen to break a piece of FRN, you'll see the little fibers in it. Rubber. Rubber is a good non-slip application or a handle application, but it's not going to hold up as well as FRN or some of these other materials. It's not as hard. But if your hands are going to be, working around a lake or river with fish, it's a good good use for rubber there to give you something to hold on to. Stagger bone. If you're having a custom knife made or you're making one on your own, those are always a classic look to them. But anymore, in my opinion, they're more of a give you the look and the nostalgic aspect of knife making, but they're not as durable and not as practical as many of the other things out there. And then titanium, aluminum, steel, any sort of steel handle, very durable. They've got a lot of good applications. If you're gonna be using your knife for everything, if it's an everyday carry, those might be good for it. If your hands are going to be wet, if you're going to be in cold environments, they might not be the best because you're going to feel that. A lot of times they don't have a soft, rounded edge to them, so you might get some hot spots if you're doing heavy use with your knife. Here's a few examples that I've got of different types. So this is one of those stabilized wood knives. This is a Benchmade. This is the knife that I carry pretty much all the time when I'm hunting. It's not a big blade, but it's got great control because of the shape of the handle. It's got jimping at the back and at the tip of the blade. It's only about a 3-inch, just shy of 3-inch long blade. It's made out of S30V and stabilized wood handles here. The sheath that I got for it is not the one it came with, but I like the versatility of this sheath, and we'll talk about that particular aspect here in just a minute. Here's a micarta handle on this. This is a Buck 112. So in recent years, Bucks really stepped up their game with their metal blade, the metal used in the blades. This is an S30V blade as well. It's got aluminum parts to the handle, and then it's got micarta on there as well. So the micarta on this, it like you see, it's kind of a brownish OD green color. It's very soft. It almost feels like you're touching fabric, but it's hard too. This is my fillet knife. It's got G10. Like I said, you can see the different layers in it. So as they form it, it gets the kind of the wood grain, the Damascus look to it. Very durable, holds up well, doesn't chip or break very easily, but it's very slick. So unless it's got some sort of inlays in it or checkering to it, it could be a slick feel. This knife here has got FRN handles. Typically within FRN, you're going to see a small steel insert inside of them. This one, I think it comes to about here inside the knife. It just adds a little bit more structure to that pivot, but overall very light, very user-friendly knife. This knife here, it's got rubber handles with plastic inlays to it. So like I said, I use this when I go fishing around trout streams and stuff. Works great for everyday carry, and it's not going to slide out of your hand. It's a little heavier, little more bulky than the FRN knife, but still a great knife. These got stag handles on them. They have that, you know, classic look to them, but they as far as use, they're gonna wear some. They're gonna chip. They have the ability to come off. They have a great look to them though. And then this knife here has got it's sculpted titanium handles on it. So it, like I said, these are very durable, but they don't have some of the comforts of, say, a rubber or a FRN or the G10 handles, because they don't have the nice smooth edges to them. They're a little more sharp, blunt edge that's going to possibly dig into your hand a little more. There are some that do a good job at rounding them, but a lot of them you're going to see are flat, and that's just due to the manufacturing aspect of them. So let's talk sheaths a little bit. 3 main types of sheaths you're going to see are your leather, which is, you know, tried and true, been out there for years. Nylon, cheap, easily producible, and then your Kydex, which is it's a formed plastic. So this one back here, this is a CRKT that I got years ago. Great heavy duty leather sheath that's held up for many years in my pack, on my belt. There's really nothing wrong with leather, other than leather does hold moisture. So if you've got a carbon steel blade, or if you've got one that's not got quite as much chromium in it, and you get moisture inside that leather, it could tend to rust the blade. On those 2 with stag handles, you also saw a little bit of verdigrease on the knife too. So certain metals react with that leather and cause a chemical reaction that gets stuff on the blade. It can be cleaned off, but it does cause problems. This one here is a nylon sheath, like I said earlier. Cheap to make, easily mass producible. It's got a plastic insert to keep from cutting the outside of it. Really nothing wrong with these. They can come apart over time. It just depends on how much use you're going to give that knife. And then Kydex. So Kydex is a very versatile type of sheath. A lot of the Kydex sheaths you see, there's no snaps or anything to hold the blade in like this. It just flips around the blade. It's heated up and either vacuum formed with a buck or with the knife itself inside it. A lot of them you'll see have either a strap that goes over it to hold it to your belt. This one had, they've got 2 screw holes. A lot of them do have that. Allows you to attach them to tech clips like this. So I carry this in a vertical position on my backpack strap so that I can pull it out and it's easily accessible when I'm hunting. Now let's talk about sharpening. So being able to care for your knives is very important. If you want to have a knife for a long time and keep it in good working condition, you have to know how to sharpen it. Or if you want to be like me and just buy a lot of knives, then you don't worry about sharpening nearly as much. But types of sharpeners that are out there now, the sharpening has become kind of an art over the last 10 years. Precision guided sharpening has taken off. So down here in the corner, you'll see this is, I can't even remember the brand off the top of my head at the moment, but what the precision guided sharpeners do is it holds the blade in a fixed location and allows you to adjust fine tune your angles by moving rods here. There's different types of them, but it allows you to move that rod to a specific angle to the cutting edge and then sweep your stones along it. So this one here has got different grits of stones that you slide on and off of these rods. By the precision guided ones, you see knives out there that have like a mirror polish to the blades, and that's typically how they're getting that. Guided block sharpeners. So this one up here, this is a unit made by WorkSharp. They've got these little blade guides on here, which do a good job of helping you set the blade angle before you start stropping it across the stone. With a lot of your newer steels like the S30Vs, D2s, you almost need a diamond stone, and that's what a lot of them have nowadays. That diamond helps take a little bit more material from the edge of the blade. And then you've got whetstones. So this here is just one example of a whetstone. Whetstones have been around for many, many years. It's one of the original types of knife sharpeners that everybody's used to. That and the little abrasive stones that you might see your dad or grandpa use. You can put a little water on that, and that helps lubricate the blade as you're sharpening. And then your pocket or field sharpener. So down here at the bottom, this is a version of a pocket or field sharpener. You can throw it in your backpack, put it in your pocket, take it with you out in the field. Typically, they've got multiple grits of abrasive on there. This one has a leather strap on this side, but they also have, you can see these yellow spots. Those are guides for your angle as well. So they do everything that this guided one would do on your desk, but you can take it with you. They're a good alternative, or you can use that as your main sharpener if you'd like to. Great way to put an edge on your knife as you're out there field dressing an animal, or if you're backpacking or out somewhere away from your truck where you can't just sharpen your knife. We're going to talk a little bit about grit and angle now. Those are 2 very important things when it comes to sharpening your knife. So the angle of the cutting edge of the blade is very important to know what you want to do with your knife. So if you're looking to do batoning wood, doing some heavy bush crafting stuff, or splitting bone on an animal, something that's the high 20s to 30 degree bevel, which that's the angle of your blade to the stone itself. Just that steeper angle isn't going to be as slicey on the edge, but it's going to allow for a durable edge that can still cut, but it won't fracture away as easily. 20 to 25, 22 to 25. So those are what most knives are going to have on them. A lot of pocket knives will get closer to that 20 area, but most heavier duty fixed blades are going to have in that 22 to 25 area. They'll give you a very sharp edge, good for cutting, good for skinning, slicing, but it's not going to stand up as heavily as the thicker blade behind it will. And that's where you might think about the the grind of it. If it's a flat grind where it's straight out from the edge, you're going to get a little thicker. If it's that hollow grind that kind of has the shape like a buck 110 would, that slicey edge trails into the face of the blade just a little bit more. 20 degrees. So 20 degrees is your standard pocket knife, very slicey, sharp edge. You're going to be able to cut a lot finer with it, but it's not going to hold up nearly as long as the thicker cutting edge. And then your 17 degrees, so that's what a kitchen knife or surgical scalpels, things like that, are going to have that very fine edge, very clean cuts, very sharp, not as durable as it gets when it's heavier. Talking a little bit about your stones now. So your 70 to 280, 300 range, that is what you're going to use for roughing out a blade. So if you've got a brand new blade that's never had an edge on it, that's where you're going to use these two. If it doesn't have a giant chip in it, I would not use something that coarse. That's just going to take way too much material away. Your 280 to 300 to 320, to me, that's kind of where you start with. If you've got a knife that you use all the time and you shine a flashlight on the edge of it, and you can see a kind of a shine to it, that means your cutting edge is rolled over or gone. So you might want to start with your 280 to 320 grit at that area, get a burr started on it, and then switch to your 600 to 800 grit. That's going to really refine that burr and edge to start getting a good cut to it. And then you'll move to your ceramic, your ceramic stone or your rod. That'll help you remove that burr and really hone that edge in. And from the ceramic area, you can move to a leather with a rouge on it if you really want to get a razor edge to it. It's not necessary, but you can definitely do that. One of the other links that I sent out is a good demonstration. You can spend 20, 30 minutes really learning how to sharpen a knife, but there's a quick video that I sent out that it shows using a field sharpener how you can get a good edge on your knife. So if you want to take a look at that. And then cleaning. So you've made the investment, you've got a good knife, you want to keep it in good working order, and that comes with cleanliness. So there's lots of ways to clean it. Lots of people can have different opinions on this. Really, soap and water is a good way to clean it. Just, you don't have to submerge it. You don't throw it in a dishwasher or get it soaked in the sink. But if you take good warm hot water and Dawn dish soap and you just rub the blade, make sure it's clean of debris and get it rinsed off. Sorry. And then drying, you can take Q-tip, pipe cleaner, get down inside of it. It's a pocket knife. If it's just your fixed blade, really no reason to get inside of it to get any debris out. But then air is a good way to remove it. So I like to take my air compressor, and if it's a pocket knife, just kind of blow out the inside, make sure there's not a bunch of moisture inside there. If I can, I'll take a piece of paper towel and rub it down in there too to make sure there's no beaded water in there. And then a little bit of light oil. You can use, I've used anything from reel oil, like fishing reel oil, in the pivots of knives. If you got a carbon steel blade, light oil on there, or WD-40. WD-40 is a water repellent, so that's a great oil. And I'm not saying just soak it in it, just a light coating. You put it some on a rag, some on your fingers, and just rub it on the blade and make sure that it's evenly coated and it's not gonna rust there. So now that you know different types of steels, different types of handle material, different types of sheaths, now it's time to make the choice. So what knife or knives works to make the cuts you're looking to? Are you, like I said, are you looking to do something that's gonna be good for skinning? So if you're looking for something that's going to be skinning, you might want to have a good round belly on that knife so that you can shave along the skin. If you don't want to have to do a whole lot of maintenance to it, look at those newer blade steels like the S30Vs and stuff like that. They're going to hold that edge a little bit longer. If you want your classic look, any of the clip point buck knives, stuff like that, those are still great options. They make them in the newer steels. I would just caution anybody to, if you're willing to spend some money and get a decent knife, I've heard the saying before, if you're willing to buy it, just buy it once. So spend some decent money, buy a decent knife. You can use it for many years. You can pass it down. There's different types, so you can buy your production knives, anything you can go to your store and buy. There's plenty of great knife makers out there, and you don't have to think that custom is going to break the bank either. I've bought plenty of production knives from Shields or Bass Pro that cost just as much as what a custom knife does. And that custom knife, you can work with makers to get everything that you want out of it. And there's plenty of guys out there that use good blade steels as well because it's readily available to them. So that's always a good option. And then there's the mid-tech knife. So mid-tech is somewhere in between your production knife and your custom made ones. They're usually a shorter run. Montana Bladesmith is what I would consider a mid-tech knife. That they do limited releases of knives that are high quality, kind of high dollar point. They are really up there on the fixed blade market as far as price, but they're also very good knives, very good quality, American made, everything. So different options to think of. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to send me an email or ask them here. There's also my Instagram page, so there's a lot of knife information, a lot of knife pictures out there on my Instagram page as well.
Very good. If you want to pull your presentation down, maybe you did already. There we go. So we're starting to get a few questions in. I like the comment you made about passing that knife down. I have my dad's deer hunting knife. It's made in Sologren, Germany, and got a red stag etched on the blade, and it doesn't get carried very often, bone handle, but I have it and I put it up in my little chest just to look at it once in a while.
Yeah, I've got some wood that my great grandpa cut up, and I've had a couple knives made out of that kitchen knife I showed. It had wood that's over 150 years old and from a tree he cut up, and I've got a slab of it still sitting around. I talked to one of the local knife makers, and he's going to make my 7 and 11-year-old son's knives with it and make me one too, so we all have a matching set.
Very nice. So let's jump into our questions here. It might cause a few more people to ask questions. So
hopefully not too hard.
We got a question or a comment from Mark. Apologize for the slowness of WebEx. Hopefully the video came up for you. Hunter wants to know how to obtain a copy of these slides.
Are you're gonna publish those, or are you gonna send those out, I guess?
Yep. We're going to put the recording up, and I'm not tech savvy if they can pull that down and use it for a presentation or just direct people to it.
Yeah. And if somebody wants to shoot me an email too, I can send them the slides.
Okay. Craig, another Craig here. I bought a couple of Leech Lake fillet knives from Shields, and they were supposed to be a lifetime free sharpening. I've called multiple times and sent emails, but haven't got any response. Do you have any ideas on how to get them sharpened?
So if you can't get a hold of the manufacturer, I'd maybe look around. Not knowing the Minnesota areas very well, but I know there's different knife shops. So in Ames, Iowa, there's a knife shop there, and some of the different knife shops, the guys, that's kind of their side hobby is they do knife sharpening. I'm sure there's several around up there. The other option is, so for about $40 to $50, you can get one of the benchtop guided sharpeners, and that way you've got that, and you can do the sharpening on your own. And that way you don't have to worry too much about somebody helping you out or getting that knife back if you want it. So it gives you that flexibility to do it at home on your own.
Yep. And I went to the hardware store the other day, and they were offering free knife sharpening, and they put my knife in a machine, and it checked for nicks in the blade, and when it came out, it was pretty sharp. I was impressed.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always seen at the local gun shows too. Is there's always the guys that do the sharpening with, and some of them are very good with the mechanical belt sharpening. It's always one thing I'm leery of, because those belts, depending on what grid of belt they got on there, you can take a lot of material and ruin a knife really quickly.
Yeah.
I know my wife's family, they live in a town with a lot of slaughterhouses, so there's guys that do knife sharpening all over that town, and some of them do it that way. And I bought them a brand new set of knives for Christmas a few years ago, and the blades look like toothpicks already.
Wow. Jeff asked a question. Can you say more about the restrictions, rules, regulations regarding automatic folding knives? So
So
I'm thinking the push button one.
yep, so that's very state dependent. Definitely check your local laws and regulations. Some states require the same as having a concealed carry permit to have an automatic knife. Some states don't even allow it. I believe California is one where if you have an automatic knife, it can't have a blade longer than 1.75 inches, or it's a sub 2 inch blade. So that's why you see some of those very stubby knives. But like I said, it's very, very dependent on your state and your state laws and regulations. So just do a Google search of automatic knife laws in Minnesota or your state. Iowa has fairly, I shouldn't say fairly lax, but if you have a concealed carry, it's fine to carry it. You can also, it's one of those, because a lot of blades now aren't, they got pocket clips and stuff on them. They're not really sealed. They're open carry for the most part. So that's kind of one of those where you see discussion around that too. But yeah, I'd start with checking local laws and regulations against them. Some it's strange. They still have laws that date back into the 50s with like Italian stilettos, and the laws are very specific to that as an automatic knife, and a lot of the new ones don't fall into that category as well.
I know yesterday we talked a little bit about CWD.
Correct.
And I've always heard have two sets of knives, one that you can just use for CWD areas and one used for non-CWD. You and I talked about bleach and water 50-50 mixture. And you guys have CWD down there? Is it an issue for you?
It is and isn't. I mean, it's not something we hear a ton about. I know southern Iowa, some of those areas have been hit pretty hard with it. Central Iowa where I hunt, it's not something that we've seen many cases of or hear a whole lot about. But yeah, the 50-50 bleach hot water mix is a good way to clean it. I would say maybe stay away from knives that have like a 2-piece or a 3-piece handle, something with wood, something that could be porous and get that in there. A lot of the knives with different G10 slabs, if it's able to come off with different types of fasteners. I think my Benchmade one, you can pull the slabs off of it and you can clean underneath it. So I guess the cleaner you can get it, the better. There are some of those new knives that don't have any sort of slab or scale on the outside of it. That would be a good option. Again, still clean it with the 50-50 bleach water mixture. Make sure you get it good and dry. I wouldn't put it back in a sheath once it's cut. That'd be another, because even though you're cleaning that blade, you're sticking it back into that sheath, and unless you can somehow get deep in that sheath, I would stay away from putting it in the sheath after you've cleaned your animal.
Yep.
And or have an extra set of knives that you can have just for that. More knives is always better.
Hunter offered a compliment. Great presentation. So
Thank you.
Hunter, for sending that in. Carol, she said, I have my father's pocket knife. Now I know much better how to care for it, and I want to be able to pass it down. Thank you for a great class. So Carol, that's a great treasure to hand down.
Thank you.
Kurt says, thanks for the presentation, Derek. If you had to choose one type style of knife for bird hunting, is there one that you would suggest?
For bird hunting, I would definitely go something that's got one type. Man, that'd be hard. That little folding one I had, I've actually used that for duck hunting. So there's let's see if I can pull that up quick. but a thin blade that's very sharp is always beneficial for bird hunting. I like pocket knives for bird hunting just because they're, you can keep them with you. And let me pop this back up quick.
I've got a knife like you're talking about, thin blade, and it also has a fold-out gut hook, so you can reach up in the cavity and pull the entrails out nice and neat.
The
Go
ahead. The razor knives like that Havalon, those are good options as well. I prefer, the oops. No, I can't get it pulled back up. But yeah, a thin blade, something that locks open, something that's easy to carry in your pocket. Whether it be stainless is usually the better way. I'm not a huge carbon steel fan just because it does take more care. It being in the Midwest, pocket sweat will make a knife rust just as quick as anything. So small thin blade pocket knife that holds a really good sharp edge.
Jeff asked a similar question. If you had to choose one knife for deer hunting, what would be the most important factor to look for?
So for me, it's the sharpness and control. Like I said, I've got that Hidden Canyon or the Hidden Canyon Hunter by Benchmade. That's I know Buck makes a very similar knife too, but a little shorter blade. I like to be able to put my finger along the backside of the spine of the blade, and instead of using a gut hook, I can get my first cut started and get inside the animal with my finger and slide it up, kind of protecting it from getting into any internal organs. It's also smaller, it's closer to your hand, so you're not as apt to hit your other hand when you're skinning and things like that. Being good steel, good sharp edge, you can get into the joints also and be able to pull things apart. So I really like that knife for deer all around. I do, I'd say 90% of my stuff with the deer with that knife. I might use something different when I'm splitting pelvis and stuff like that. But as far as most of the deer, skinning, field dressing, everything, it's that knife.
Yep. Let's see here. For sharpening technique, it says, this is from Joe, draw or bring up the burr versus push to finish the edge. Is that technique that you've heard?
That's one of those, it goes both ways. I traditionally used to draw it myself, but then as I've done a little bit more looking and kind of researching, the pushing the knife versus drawing it towards you is what I've moved to. You still get a burr on there, and it removes a little bit more material, I feel. I don't know if that's correct or not, but when you're pushing, it just kind of keeps that same motion. I usually do about 15 strokes per side, alternating back and forth between the different grits. And then when I get to the ceramic portion of it, again, I'll still push away from me. Usually use a little bit slightly higher angle on it. And that's a lot of those guided sharpeners will actually force you to use a slightly higher angle so that you're getting just the very edge of it when you're using the ceramic stone. And then I use a little bit of soap and water mixture just to help lubricate it. And you can actually get a mirror polish with just a ceramic stone and ceramic rod.
In my fanny pack, I carry a couple of different knife sharpeners. I've got like a diamond stone that opens like a butterfly knife. So there's plastic coating on each side covering. The nicest one that I've found is it's about as long as a house key, and it's got two little carbide. You just draw your blade through that V.
Draw type ones.
And it for putting a quick edge on a knife, if you're doing whatever in the field, it works really, really nice for that. But I always carry a knife sharpener with me. You just never know when you're going to get into a situation with an animal or whatever that all of a sudden your knife is dull and you need to touch it up a little bit.
Yeah, I've for the longest time I carry multiple knives versus the knife sharpener. I typically only use the one knife, but just in case I've got multiple there. But I've been seriously looking at some of the smaller pocket field sharpeners because they have a lot of the same characteristics your big ones do, and it's just in a package you can carry with you. So if you're
Yeah.
camping, it's a great thing to do around the fire at night. Make sure you got a good honed edge for the next day.
Well, I don't see any new questions coming in. Anything that you'd like to leave our audience with?
No, I hope I hope what I've said helps you, I guess, make your decision on what knife to get. And like I said, I put my email on there. If you've got any questions as far as brands of knives, types of knives, different steels, things like that, feel free to reach out. That's one thing I heard from a friend of mine from high school that I hadn't heard from in 10 years the other night. And that was the one thing he saw was he's like, hey, I know you're into knives. Can you help me out with a different type of multi-tool? So I'm always glad to give my input and try to help steer people in the right direction with making their decision.
Well,
I
I
got
want to
one
thank you for
question
coming
for him,
in.
real
Oh,
quick,
go ahead.
Craig. So I have this knife was given to me. It's a little Japanese blade,
Yep.
but it's carbon steel. It's starting to rust and stuff.
Yep.
Taking care of that, what's the best way to clean that up and protect it in the future?
So there's a few products out there. Semi-chrome is one that different gun and knife makers have pushed for a long time. But if you go to any hardware store, you can most likely find Bars Keeper's Friend. And so Bars Keepers has got a very fine abrasive in it. That or Brasso, either of those two are great for cleaning off a little bit of surface rust and getting a nice polish back on a carbon steel. And then once you get it good and cleaned off, then put a little bit of light oil on there and just make sure it keeps something like WD-40 or a light oil that's not going to wear away. And if it does, just make sure you get a little bit back on there. But pocket, like I said, the moisture in pockets is one thing that always causes carbon steel to rust.
One little knife, I started carrying in my pocket, and then it started rusting on me, and I'm like, oh, now I got to figure that out. So great timing for this presentation.
Yep.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you again.
Yep,
You,
thank you.
had a great show. Cassie, I'll have you take us back to the green room and turn the recording off.